Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here, the host of this show. Every week I get to talk to such interesting CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, a range of companies. From go take a look at my backlog, my back catalog, at all kinds of interesting interviews with the former CEO and co-founder of Netflix to YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, LendingTree, OpenTable. Check out the back catalog. There's lots of great content there. I'm also the co-founder of Rise 25, where we help connect B2B business owners to their ideal prospects. And this week we've got a great guest. His name is Jason Smith. He's the founder of Spotlight Social, which he founded about 5 years ago in 2016. Before that, he spent 14 years in a uniform with the Los Angeles Police Department, LAPD police officer. He's got some crazy stories that he's going to share about getting embedded into gang life there in Los Angeles and kind of some of the threats. So stay tuned for that. Now lives in Colorado with his wife and his children. And he, interestingly enough, kind of had a side gig helping people with online traffic, advertising, Facebook ads, and that became his core thing. And that's how he ended up leaving the police department. But first, before we get into that, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25 Media, where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with Done-For-You podcasts and content marketing. If you have a B2B business and you've ever been curious about starting a podcast, give us a call, shoot us an email, contact us, rise25media.com, or email us at support@rise25media.com. All right, Jason, such a pleasure to have you here. And, it's a little bit of a disconnect because you don't look like a gang member, but you got the Colorado look, you got the fleece on and all that kind of stuff. And I know you and I both grew up kind of in the same neck of the woods. You were in Newbury Park. I grew up in Calabasas. Yep. You grew up on the mean streets in Newbury Park, exactly. Which is on the edge of Ventura County. I joke because it's not really known as gang land.
No.
But you go into the LAPD and you're going around chasing gang members. How do you think that? What was it about you, maybe your personality, that enabled you to do what you did for many years? Investigating gang life in the heart of LA.
Yeah. So I think, first of all, whatever I do, I put in, 110% effort in everything I do. So I'm one of those guys that just dives in with both feet, and I want to learn as much as I can. And my job at the time was, LAPD, working in the worst neighborhoods of Los Angeles, South LA, Boyle Heights, East LA, all those areas. And I loved being out there. I loved cleaning up neighborhoods. And, again, I just dove in with both feet and said, okay, if I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do it. I'm going to, go out there and look for the bad guys. It's not too often in life where we go actually look for bad things to happen, but that's what I was doing every night. And in LA, there's no shortage of bad guys. So, my personality is just go, go, go. I'm kind of I can't sit still for 20 minutes. So, it's just one of those things. I love doing it. At the time, it was great, but it also came with certain drawbacks as a gang cop for so many years in Los Angeles, and what happens when you work too hard in a neighborhood and try to put these guys away. So
how did it affect your family?
Oh man. It's tough on your personal life. You see things, and you just kind of keep them inside because, do you really want to talk about the 10 homicide scenes you were at that night where guys' heads are blown off and, or car accidents where cars are ripped in half and, bodies are decapitated, all that kind of stuff. It's not stuff you really want to talk about when you get home. You actually kind of want to put it away and not talk about it, not really think about it. So, it's tough. I mean, I was never home. On my days off, I was either testifying as a gang expert, testifying as a weapons expert. Once the DAs know that you're great on the stand, they call you in for all kinds of gang cases and, all this stuff. And, I had my own cases too. I was chasing guys every night with weapons and, getting in shootings and doing all kinds of stuff. So I had, all kinds of things going on. I would stay at the station for two or 3 days straight, and couldn't go to my kids' soccer games or football games or whatever. My wife had to do all that. So it's tough. I mean, when you work in a place like that, and if you're a good cop, I mean, that's the territory. It comes with that, So,
everyone has trouble sometimes switching between, work life and home life and separating the two, disconnecting.
Yeah.
How did you disconnect from everything you'd seen or experienced or gone through and work, and then be, present with your family?
I mean, a lot of extracurricular activities, I guess. I used to race professional motocross, so I still ride motorcycles, wakeboard, wake surf, all that stuff. And, that was one way to be able to cope and just get out and do things and not think about work. And really it takes a certain type of person to be like that and to do that. And you just learn after years and years of doing it, that you just put it in the back of your mind, and you're a different person at home than you are, on the streets of Los Angeles as a policeman wearing a badge, and everybody hating you. So,
yeah,
because really that's how it is in LA. Everybody hates you.
Hates the cops.
Oh yeah. Like everybody. You got 5-year-old kids flipping you off when you drive by, and you're like, whoa, all right, cool. Glad your parents taught you good. Yeah, kind of crazy.
What you had an experience where you kind of got in the crosshairs of a gang that was had literally kind of figuratively a bullseye on your back.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah. So, and that was, you and I talked before the podcast. That was kind of the breaking point for me, I think. What ended up happening was, after working this housing project in LA, and for those of you who don't know what a housing project is, it's essentially a government assisted living place. But in LA, those government assisted living, like gang members just take them over. And it's a very big housing project, one of the biggest ones in Los Angeles and East LA, right off the 10 freeway in Soto, right there. If anybody knows that area. Just pounding the pavement every night, arresting guys, every violent situation known to man I was in these housing projects with these guys. And they just got tired of it. They got tired of me being there. They got tired of me. I ended up getting into some shootings with guys in that housing project. I was very hard on them. We initiated a gang injunction there as well, which essentially meant that if I saw a known gang member hanging out with another known gang member, I could arrest them on the spot. No probable cause, no nothing. I could just go arrest them. And they were just tired of it. I mean, I literally broke up they were slanging PCP out of the projects as well. And that's a huge drug in Los Angeles. And I put a damper on that. I mean, we're talking hundreds of gallons a day being sold of PCP, which is, in liquid form, and put a damper on that. They were losing money. So they're just tired of it. So they ended up putting what's called a green light on me. And the green light basically means that they want me dead. So what ended up happening was a couple informants come forward and say, hey, you got to, Smith, you got to get out of here. They're going to kill you. They've already formulated a plan of how they're going to do it. And I was lucky enough to actually for these guys to come forward, because I probably wouldn't be here today if not. I mean, and I don't know how deep you want to get into it, but essentially they had planned. They knew where I got on the freeway, and I'd try to take different routes, but they knew kind of where I got on the freeway. They knew I drove a white Chevy Tahoe at the time. They knew everything about me, which is pretty crazy.
You even said that the LAPD had to protect your home for a while.
Yeah, they
So you had other LAPD cops outside of your house.
Yeah, yeah. So I essentially had a couple cars sitting on my house just in case, and essentially what they were going to do is they had stolen about 6 or 7 cars, and they had requested a bunch of AK-47s because they also knew what kind of policeman I was, and they knew I wasn't just going to, roll over and be like, okay, you got me. They knew I was going to fight it out with them. I had a certain reputation on the street as well. So with these guys, and because I've been in multiple shootings and stuff. And yeah, they stolen a bunch of cars. They requested a bunch of AK-47s essentially from the higher ups in the gang. They approved it. And what they were going to do was they were going to have a couple cars sitting off the on-ramp, and they were going to box me in on the on-ramp and just, light me up with hundreds of rounds of AK-47. And they would have got me for sure. I probably would have taken a few of them out before they got me, but yeah, and that's what their plan was. And at that point I was like, man, what am I doing? Making $80,000 a year, putting my family in danger, myself in danger, not knowing, if they were going to come after me, which I still don't know actually to this day, because the only way to get rid of a green light is to be dead.
Was there ever any time where you were in a shootout or cornered, or you thought you weren't going to get out of it?
Yeah, there were a couple times, especially fights with these guys. I mean, these guys know how to fight. They grew up in the neighborhood, in prison, their whole lives. There were several times where I would, getting my butt kicked on the ground by some of these gang members, and you just kind of, you got to search your soul a little bit and say, okay, am I going to sit here and die, or am I going to get out of this situation? And LAPD is very strict with how you use lethal force, and can't just go shoot them if they don't have a weapon, So yeah, I've been in several fights where I'm like, okay, I'm losing this right now. Like, what am I going to do? And I like to chase guys on foot. So I was pretty fast. And so by the time I was already tied up with guys by the time my partner would get there, so, oh yeah, there were several times. I mean, there were even the shootings I was in. I mean, I got shot at, 10 times in the projects. Wow. They shot at my vehicle. I mean, they didn't like me. So,
wow, that's a lot of times that the bullets missed. 10 times.
Yeah. And the situations I was in, being shot at, it's scary, man. Like if there's any guy that says, oh no, I wasn't scared, they're blowing smoke. I was scared, and that's part of why you get to pull out your weapon and fire, is because you're fearing for your life. And if you don't fire, if I didn't fire and do what I did, I'd probably be dead today, So,
right. Now you went to other stations, and you still didn't feel comfortable at those other stations. It seemed at some certain point you concluded that I need to leave entirely.
Yeah. I just, in talking to, my wife and stuff, and just the whole situation, it's just stupid for me to continue. I mean, I would have died out there eventually, probably being the type of policeman I was, and the attention I attracted by working these projects. And, it wasn't just that gang that had it out for me. It was a bunch of gangs in East LA. And then they kind of team up, and they're like, screw the rivalship. We want to get this guy out of here. So let's team up and try to get this dude, And
anyone can bring the gangs together. It's you, Jason.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. So yeah, it was crazy. And I actually got assigned to another station. They wouldn't let me go out on the street. And
what was that like, going from the excitement to, like something that's just, you're safer, but it's more boring?
Yeah, it was horrible. Like I was handing out equipment, every night after roll call and stuff. It was, typical movie where a dude does something bad and then you're like,
desk job.
Yeah, exactly. Like riding the pine, and it was horrible because not only that, but I went from a very busy, violent place to the valley, where it was super slow. Well, slow and LAPD standards, which the valley still had a lot more violence going on than a lot of the other places and even the surrounding areas and there in Los Angeles. But yeah, it was horrible. Like I freaking wanted to shoot myself every night. I'm like, okay, let's, and then I would say, hey, when can I go back out? And they're like, dude, you're not going back out anytime soon, after all that happened. Cause I was assigned home for a couple months. And then finally they were like, okay, you can come back to work. And And then, and then I got to go back to work, but handing out equipment and doing nothing.
Yeah.
I
do want to ask about how you avoid that feeling now that you're completely out of it. You're not in uniform at all. You're in a completely different state, working through a computer all the time. But first, before we get to that, so you had a friend who had supplements and you ended up helping him out with his Facebook ads, which ended up leading to a new profession for you. So talk a little bit of how that came about.
Yeah, I mean, despite the fact that I was sitting there doing nothing and I had a lot of time to be on the internet and researching things. So, at that point, I was kind of looking for something else. I didn't know what it was going to be. Most LAPD guys or most policemen like do security or something. I'm like, man, I don't want to do that. And I used to do executive security. I mean, I used to drive around Tom Cruise and go to all these photo shoots and do all this stuff. And it sounds cool. It's not that cool. But what ended up happening was my buddy, he knew I had some time on my hands, especially at work. And, we're working the 312. So we get 3 days on, usually 3 or 4 days off, stuff like that. So I had some time and he was like, hey man, as you know, I have this business and I heard about these Facebook ads and people are making like quite a bit of income off these ads. And of course you have to pay for the marketing expense and all that. But, I'm thinking about doing it. And then I'm like, hey, sure. He was one of my buddies. And I'm like, yeah, let's see if we can do it together. And, I didn't know I was creative and could actually do anything like that. But, lo and behold, I was, I helped him write some copy. And then next thing you know, he was making 15, 20,000 a month in revenue with some Facebook ads. And I didn't even know what I was doing. So then I kind of delve in deeper and really researched, Facebook ads and what's really possible. And that's kind of how it all started for me. So.
Yeah. What year was this?
This was 2013, I believe.
Okay.
2012-ish around there. Yeah, 2013.
The glory days of Facebook ads. And you start making more money on the side than you were as a cop.
Yeah. So then what ended up happening was I found this like certification course and this company was like, hey, we can teach you how to become a Facebook ad expert. We'll even take you to Facebook and, all that stuff. And so I ended up paying a lot of money, not even really knowing what I was doing. I paid it was like 15 grand for this course.
That's not
and
small.
I'm like, typical me, I'm like, all right, let's go for it. So I ended up doing it. And next thing you know, I'm like, I have like 4 or 5 clients. I'm making $15,000 a month. And to a policeman, $15,000 a month, like that's insane. Like you're like, there's no way I can work at home remotely and make $15,000 a month. It was like 10,000 and then I got up to 15 and I'm like freaking out. And then literally woke up and I'm like, this is it for me. Woke up one day, threw my resignation on the watch commander's desk and said, I'm out of here. Praise the Lord, And he was even like, no way. Like you're not being serious. And I'm like, no, I am. And I dropped my box, all my equipment on his desk. And I'm like, okay, what else do I need to do to get out of here? And literally 2 days later, I was gone.
Wow. Wow. So was it kind of a impulsive thing at the end there or no? Or was it
no, I mean,
kind of building over time?
Yeah, I was building over time. And again, like I had actually gone out on the street again. I was back out on the street, doing my normal stuff back at the station I was working at before. And I was just like, man, and then another couple things happened, which we don't really need to get into, but I mean, I can if you want, but another few things happened.
Depends. Were they crazy? If they were crazy, bring the crazy.
Yeah. One of them was pretty crazy.
Because I'm picturing here, like if you get retired from the LAPD, you got to go like Riggs and Murtaugh from Lethal Weapon style. Like my retirement's coming 30 days from now. I just need to get through these last 30 days. Of course, that's like the end. But
yeah. No, and I didn't even retire. I mean, I literally walked in and resigned. And what I did was end up cashing out of my retirement, which I had a lot of money in there. And guys thought I was crazy. But I talk to them now and they're like, dude, best thing you ever did was leave. But anyways, what ended up happening, one other incident took place. I was, of course, out there running amok, arresting gang members. And there was a gang right next to the housing projects that I'd like to go into and arrest. And I had put this dude away. They called him Sniper. I had put this dude away for, I don't know, I think it was 7 or 8 years, and he just got out. Well, his mission.
Did someone give you a heads up about this, or
no? Well, so let me tell you what happened. Was this dude gets out, called him Sniper. I didn't know he was out because I dealt with him before, and apparently his whole mission in jail was when he got out, if I was still in the neighborhood, he was going to try to do something to me. And so what ends up happening is this gang calls the station, says, hey, is Officer Smith working? Of course, being sometimes these dumb cops, they're like, oh yeah, he's working tonight. Okay, great. So they're like, cool. We know Smith's working tonight. So they end up stiffing in a call at this bar that they knew I always went to, because I went there every night, and it was a gang member bar. They would slang dope out of there and prostitution and all that stuff. And I'd always chase guys into the bar, catch them with guns or whatever, dope and whatever. And, whatever gang member was in there, so I'd arrest.
They call it a fake call of some sort?
Yeah. So they one of the, well, and actually a female, because I heard the recording after, a female stiffs in a call. They got a female to do it and said, hey, there's a bunch of gang members at the Troquero bar, which is with this bar on Cesar Chavez right there. And there's like, they're going to start shooting or something. And of course they knew I was going to be there, right? They're like, oh dude, if Smith's working, a call like this comes out, he's going to be here. So sure enough, what I ended up doing, like I always do, I parked I was working by myself that night. I parked about 4 blocks away because I didn't want to alert anybody that I was in the area. Because, typical dumb cops, they'll like drive up and everybody runs and you don't get anybody. But I wanted to do it differently. So I start walking up. So there was like this crackhead, this lady, older lady, total crackhead, lives on the streets. But I was always nice to her. I don't know why I was always nice to her. I was just like, I'd have conversations with her because she was always kind of hanging out right near this bar where I would arrest all these gang members over the years. And her name was Lupe. So, and she knew me by my first name, Jason, whatever. So I'm walking up to the bar and she comes up to me and she stops me and she says, hey, and I could see the look in her face, just like pale white. She's like, if you walk in there right now, they're going to shoot you coming through the door. And I'm like, nah, Lupe, don't worry about it. I got it. I'm in there like every day. She's like, no. And she literally like got in front of me. And here's this like lady lives on the streets. She doesn't have to be nice to me, And she tells me, she said, you've always been nice to me. I couldn't live with myself if I let you walk through the door knowing that, they were going to kill you. So I end up looking at the door and I see an AK-47 barrel, a shotgun barrel, and a bunch of other gang members standing inside with guns waiting for me because they knew I was going to walk through the door.
Wow.
And then there was a couple other guys in the back. And so anyways, make a long story short, surrounded the building. We ended up arresting, I think, 14 gang members. And I think we got, if I remember correctly, like 10 AK-47s that night, 7 pistols, knives, all kinds of ammunition, dope, and all that stuff. But I literally, and that was like, even my wife was like, okay, dude, you're running out of lives here. Like you're like, you can't do this anymore. You're going to end up dying out there, So I said, okay. And that was another kind of nail in my coffin there. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Like I gotta leave my ego. Cause my ego was like, oh no, I'm going to stay out here. I'm going to get these. No one can get me. That's kind of like my mindset. But you know how the old saying, you get too cocky, you get sloppy, and something happens. So
right.
That was also kind of the last straw. And I was just like, okay, you know what? I already have a side gig going. I'm making a ton of money. Well, to me, it was a ton of money. Right. And that was it. I just, a couple days later after that incident, walked in and quit.
Wow.
So,
wow.
yeah.
What a crazy experience. I asked earlier about how do you adjust to this new life now, working behind a computer?
Yeah.
So much less exciting, right? The excitement of what you were doing before.
But I honestly don't miss it. I had a partner for about 10 years. Him and I worked together. I mean, we knew everything about each other. We knew what each other was going to do on the street. Like when we were dealing with guys, I miss him. Right. And I still talk to him. I miss being with him every night.
Yeah.
I don't miss the job. I don't miss the violence. I don't miss having to fight my way out of situations. I've always kind of been a fighter. I like that, adrenaline rush and fighting and stuff. But
You could do MMA now if you want.
yeah, I know, right? I'm too old now, but yeah, I mean, it's tough, I mean, it is, but I don't miss it. And people ask me all the time, oh, you must miss it. I'm like, no, I don't miss it at all. I don't miss the politics of the police department. I don't miss getting called into the captain's office because I got into another use of force and, oh, I got into another shooting and I did this and I did that. And that's like a bad thing. I'm like, dude, I'm out here cleaning up neighborhoods and you guys are telling me to stop. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't miss it at all. I love what I do now.
Sometimes people, when they move from something like that, where it's so purposeful, you're cleaning up streets, you're cleaning up neighborhoods, you're helping families, to what they're doing now. I don't want to say it's not purposeful, but it's a different kind of purpose. So how do you reconcile those two? How do you remain motivated in what you do if it's, selling a product versus what you were doing before?
Well, now, I mean, my job now is to help businesses grow and scale and make more money than they ever have on Facebook. I mean, that's my purpose now, and we do it daily. We've taken businesses from zero to spending $300,000 a month on Facebook at a 3x return. I mean, I've changed their lives completely by, having an agency that runs high quality, world-class Facebook ads and Instagram ads. Like, that's my purpose now. And, again, like my old self and like I've always done, you get 110% of me because that's just how I am. And that's how we run Facebook ads. We're aggressive, we're smart, we know what we're doing. And that's my new purpose, and I love it. And I get to be the only dad at field trips now. Like, I love that, like
you weren't before, now you are.
Nope. Yeah. And like the people, and I'm 6'2", I'm about 200 pounds. I'm sleeved in tattoos. I used to have a really long beard and people look at me and they're like, oh my gosh, this guy looks kind of crazy. But then they get to know me and they're like, oh my, he's like the nicest guy in the world, and I mean,
you got to point them to this podcast in the future.
Yeah.
This is what it used to be like.
Yeah. Well,
don't mess with me.
Yeah. Like I can be an asshole if I need to go there, obviously don't mistake my kindness for weakness, but man, it's just, I'm super chill now and I love what I do. I get to pick up my kids from school every day and take them to school every morning. Be involved in their lives like I've never been able to do. I have a better personal life now than I ever have before. Actually, when I quit from the police department, about 3 or 4 months later, my parents told me, they said, you look 10 years younger, and it's because of the stress, the stress and just being worn down all the time and working, from 3 in or 3 in the afternoon to 3 in the morning and then coming home, getting 3 hours sleep and doing it all over again for years, that just wears on you, not only does the police department, that job wears on you personally, but it's the schedule. It's how busy you are. It's, oh, I only have an hour till I have to go back to work. I've been testifying in court all day. Like, it's hard on you,
And you have a crazy story about your wife, your relationship with your wife. You guys separated and then got back together, right?
Yeah. I mean, the police, it was tough on us. We ended up getting divorced, actually officially divorced. And in California, that's pretty hard. And then we ended up, after I quit, I kind of got my act together and I wasn't gone all the time, all that stuff. We ended up getting back together and we've never been happier. So,
amazing.
Yeah,
Did you have kids before you got divorced?
Yep. Two kids before I got divorced. And
I always think it's funny. I always think it's crazy when I meet someone who says their parents were together, got divorced, and then got back together again. But I've met a bunch of people like that.
And we had a great relationship when we weren't together. Like my kids were never stressed. We never fought about anything. As a matter of fact, there was a time where I wasn't working. I mean, I was working doing Facebook ads, but I would go to her house when we weren't together, crash on her couch, get the kids, like, cause she had to go to work early in the morning. So I said, no, I don't want a babysitter. I'm going to be the one watching them. I would go get them ready at her house, pick them up, and we take them to school, drop them off. I'd pick them up from school. So, I was more involved as a single parent being divorced, not being a part of the police department than I was at the police department married with my wife. I was more involved later, which was crazy,
Yeah.
So,
one of the recurring themes that I ask about on this podcast is asking people about sometimes it's really hard, the decisions you make in life and the impact that they have on immediate family members, whether it's
Yes.
parents or siblings or spouses, and them doubting you.
Yes.
Growing up in Newbury Park, I imagine there weren't a lot of your classmates who did what you did, go work in, in the middle of LA,
No.
kind of gang work that you did. And also, leaving behind, moving and going from the LAPD, leaving that, you spoke about that in a moment, but talk a little bit about, what these decisions in life were like when you had family members, I imagine, questioning at the time why you were making the decision that you were.
Yeah, I mean, as far as my father is a retired FBI agent, so I saw him, and I didn't really want to be an FBI agent because I was more hands-on. I didn't want to push paper as much, but he didn't want me to join the police department. He's like, listen, like, if you're going to do anything, maybe come to the FBI or U.S. Marshal or CIA or something like that. Like, don't go to the police department. It's really hard on you. But I still did it. Obviously, right?
And he was right.
And he was right. And
Yeah.
I tell him that every day. I'm like, Dad, you should have like,
why didn't you talk me out of it?
Yeah, exactly. So, and he tried to talk me out of it, but being the person I was, I'm like, no, Dad, it'll be okay. Like, he's like, listen, I know you got a good head on your shoulders, but it will get to you eventually, and it did. And look at, and he also knew me as a person. He knew if I was going to become a cop, I was going to be aggressive and, jump in with both feet 110%. And that's just how I am. And that worried him, cause he, I try to be the best at everything I do. And, yeah, it was tough. And, in the police department, it's a long process. I didn't get hired for like 8 months, and then you're in the academy for 7 months and, all that stuff. So, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have done it, and I would have been much further along in my agency and would have been much better off in life if I would have listened to my dad.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. What was, how did that influence you, him being an FBI agent when you were growing up?
I mean, it was cool. He didn't talk about it much because it was, highly classified, a lot of the stuff that he was doing. And he's not one to brag about what he did. And, but he did a lot of substantial things at the FBI. But all I knew was he, would pull up in his work car and his FBI car and then head out to work. And I didn't know much about it until, I became a policeman and it's just cool having a dad who's, FBI, people are like, oh man, that's so awesome,
Right.
Or my friends or my buddies and stuff. But, he was also my dad, right? He was, the guy that, would discipline me and growing up but he was a good role model. He was a good example to me. And had a lot of life experience that I didn't necessarily know he had until I got older and figured out pretty quickly that I probably should have listened to him more than several times,
Did he tell any, first of all, he was involved in something that became the Falcon and the Snowman. So
yes, he was.
Tell everyone what the Falcon and the Snowman was and what his involvement was.
Yeah, so Falcon and the Snowman, they were bank robbers, and the reason why they called the Snowman was because he also dealt and was very heavy into the world of cocaine, powder cocaine. And then the Falcon, the guy who they called the Falcon, that's his hobby on the side was he loved falcons and he had pet falcons and all that stuff. Well, anyways, they became some notorious bank robbers. And at the time, my dad was assigned to the bank robbery unit at the time. And he was the one that actually led the whole investigation, arrested them. And it was back in the 70s, maybe, I think. And if you Google Falcon and the Snowman and read up on it, my dad's name is the one as the leading investigator and the one who arrested him. His name comes out in the movie. Actually, there's an actor, with portraying him and stuff in the movie and stuff. It was pretty crazy. Cool. So yeah.
Were there any crazy stories that your dad told you years later that you didn't know about at the time?
Yeah. There were actually some pretty crazy ones. He almost got into a shooting, chasing a guy across the border. Much like myself, I guess, in his younger years, he was probably much like me, very aggressive. And, he he said he solved a couple murders, got confessions from guys, pretty cool stuff. So, again, he's my dad, right? And you don't see, I never saw him in that capacity until I did what I did at LAPD and stuff. And then the insight that he gave me after I was a policeman was pretty awesome.
Yeah. It's hard to sometimes get those out, especially out of men. My grandfather was a B-17 pilot, did 35 missions over Nazi Germany, 35
awesome.
missions. Most of those pilots didn't come back at all.
Yeah.
And, his later in life, when I knew him, when I was a kid, he was very reserved. Wasn't like, let me tell you about the time we bombed Berlin, wasn't at all like that.
And actually, if funny enough too, I specifically remember, I think I was about 15 years old, and my dad got called out on Christmas Day, and he couldn't tell me at the time because it was all classified. But after he retired, he's like, "Hey, you remember that one time I got called out on Christmas Day?" I'm like, "Yeah." He was actually going to follow Osama Bin Laden, is what he did.
Wow,
which was pretty crazy. So,
what year was it?
Gosh, man. And it's funny because he's like, I've known about Osama bin Laden for years,
Yeah.
And he came to the US unannounced, and that set off a red flag for them. So they put a unit together really quick and followed him wherever he went. But this was probably 1990, around there, 89, 90, maybe, because I graduated from high school in 94. So I was 14 or 15. So around there. Yeah,
Wow.
kind of crazy.
Wow, what a crazy story.
Yeah.
I want to wrap things up with the two questions that I always enjoy asking, which is, first of all, I'm a big fan of gratitude. So
Yep.
you look around at peers and contemporaries, however you define that. Who do you respect? Who do you admire?
Yeah, so I respect and admire, I think my dad, number one, but peers. So when I was early in my Facebook ads journey with that certification I went to, I still keep in contact with the owner of that company and one of the guys that works for them to this day. And they're the ones that gave me my first two clients. And if it wasn't for those guys, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And I talk about it on my podcast. Actually, the first three episodes.
You want to mention, give them a shout out?
Yeah. So Ralph Burns at Tier 11. He's one of my mentors, and just love him to death. Again, I wouldn't be standing where I am today. I wouldn't be as successful as I am today if it wasn't for him. And then Deacon Bradley, who also works for Tier 11. And Deacon actually, saw something in me that I necessarily didn't see in myself when I was doing starting the agency. He gave me my first two clients, and crazy enough, that first client he gave me is still with us today. Wow. So yeah, and I'm truly grateful for everything those guys did. They didn't have to do that. They didn't have to spend hours, coaching me and talking to me, but they did, and I always pass that along as well. Like the same thing they did for me, I do for others when I can. So.
Right. I think one thing I'm constantly fascinated with is just hearing who people turn to, especially in big pivots in their career. When you move to a new industry, move to a new field, new expertise, and you don't know anything about it, and who, helps you with that wisdom. And it's wonderful to hear people acknowledge it. Last question. Let's pretend we're at an awards banquet, much like the Oscars or the Emmys. You are being awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award for everything you've done up until this point. And what we all want to know is, who do you thank? You mentioned a bunch of names so far, but who are the colleagues, who are the friends, who are the mentors, who are the business partners, who are the people that you would acknowledge in your remarks?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say, I think number one on my list is probably, my dad, for always being a great example, not only a great example in work and his work ethic, but with my family. I hardly ever saw him raise his voice at my mom or anything like that. Great example of what a true man should be. And again, I always go back to Ralph and Deacon. Those two guys are probably the ones I turn to most in the business side of things, which I want to thank, would thank them over and over again. And I think my wife, who has always supported me no matter what, and told me to quit the police department, but didn't know what I was going to do. And here we are living a lifestyle that I never dreamed of living. And I'm grateful for that. So,
Jason, where can people go to connect with you, learn more about you? Thanks so much for sharing your story. It's great.
Yeah, no problem. It's hard for me to talk about some of that stuff. I'm not good at talking about myself. But yeah, you can reach out to me at jason@spotlightsocialllc.com or head over to our website at spotlightsocialadvertising.com. And if you want to chat, fill out the contact form, chat with you. And yeah, we love helping businesses grow and scale on Facebook. And that's what we're really good at. So
Jason Smith, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
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 And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.